Looks good, Jonathan.
All right, great. So I'll just get started then. Okay, in this talk, I will discuss my research in Papua, Indonesia, but this is not an academic talk. Guiding my anthropological research were basic questions about what kind of life people want, imagine, and pursue, particularly in regard to development and the resulting environmental, social, and cultural changes. As a complement to my dissertation writing, which is primarily an intellectual endeavor, photography has a direct and emotional power to communicate the lived experience of people. It is also a way to engage with these issues in my own life. For my PhD research, I explored these questions with the Abun people of Papua. I am grateful for my time with them, for their generosity, patience, and goodwill. I continue to reflect on themes of finding the good life in my own experience, transitioning from research in Indonesia to life in rural Alaska. I'll try my best to weave these two threads and draw connections between these two very special places on the planet. But first we have to ask, well, where is Papua? The names Papua and New Guinea are understandably a source of confusion for almost everyone not from or particularly interested in this region. It's a bit confusing. We are nearly on the opposite corner of the Pacific from Alaska. New Guinea, one of the world's largest islands, is a place of exceptional biological and cultural diversity, from coral reefs to coastal swamplands, vast rainforests, and towering glacial mountain peaks. And let us not forget the people there who speak roughly 1/6 of the world's languages. Many people have a sense of where the country of Papua New Guinea is, which is here. But Papua New Guinea is just the eastern half of the island of New Guinea. The western half is Papua. See, I told you it's a little confusing. Papua is part of Indonesia, though many Papuans long to be independent or even join with Papua New Guinea to make a country someday. Why is that? Well, Papua is ethnically and culturally quite distinct from the rest of Indonesia, which is itself an amazingly diverse country of over 800 languages. On the left here is a Balinese woman participating in a big funeral procession, and on the right, an Abun woman from Papua in dance attire. Historically, genetically, and culturally, Papuans share much more with the tribes of Papua New Guinea and even Aboriginal Australians than they do with the rest of Indonesia. So let's zoom in a little. Here we are in Papua, and more specifically in Tombrau, on the bird's head of New Guinea. This is where I researched among the Abun, an ethnic group of about 4,000 people. Like Alaska is the United States, Papua is Indonesia's frontier, a largely developed region of the country that very few Indonesians will ever visit. Papua has a mystique, and it's known for its breathtaking beauty and vast expanses of dense jungle, much of it claimed by Papua's hundreds of indigenous peoples. As an outsider, it is also very expensive and in many ways hard and at times dangerous place to make a life, or even just to travel to. Yet, like Alaska, Papua is rich in natural resources and much less densely populated than other regions of the country. That means it attracts an increasing number of migrants searching for economic opportunity. There is even a verb for this in Indonesia, merantau, which means to seek your fortune abroad. It is simply the search for a better life, for happiness. Here on the left, a teacher from the distant Toraja Highlands teaches in the Abun Highlands, earning just $200 a month. On the right is a driver from Makassar, one of Indonesia's largest cities. He drives 4x4s for transport on roads still under construction, an exhausting and very dangerous job. Papua is developing quickly, and this is offering opportunities, but also major questions about its future and the potential threats to the well-being of the region's many native peoples and the forests that they depend on. My focus in terms of research and of my camera was on how the indigenous Abun are navigating an influx of change that is both good and bad. Anthropology is a discipline that often tries to do two opposing things at the same time, and sometimes with a degree of success. What is unique or particular about a given place, group of people, and culture? And also, what are the underlying and shared human elements that are common to all of us on this planet? This is a difficult task. I found that the questions the Abun are grappling with can be much the same as people everywhere, especially those in areas where natural resources, wilderness, and living off the land are valued. Few topics are more deserving of our attention than how we define and determine success in living the good life. In other words, the pursuit of happiness, of finding contentment and meaning in this life. What constitutes the good life in a place is sometimes well defined and at other times very contested, especially as the society changes. It is something people discuss in hushed or lively tones around a fire, debate ardently in the political realm, and sometimes even go to war over. What do we value most, and how do we realize it? Is it social relationships with family and friends, or independence, freedom, and the possibility of personal growth? Is it measured by material plenty or spiritual connection, by social and economic progress, or harmony with the natural environment? Sometimes we can find a balance between these different parts of our needs and desires. Sometimes it becomes a struggle or confusing to know where our sense of well-being comes from. Do we need to change or better understand and appreciate what we already have around us? There are no easy answers. In a way, many of the issues facing the Abun and other Papuans can be distilled into one simple question. What happens when you build a road through the rainforest? Life, both human social life and the surrounding ecology, change in unexpected and expected ways, in complicated ways, which is good for writing a PhD dissertation. Global studies have made it clear that the single greatest threat to a rainforest ecology is building a road through it. That's when the changes begin, and they are never very good for biodiversity. My research, though, focuses on the human effects, and they're much more mixed. In anthropology, we take care to guard against romanticizing the lives of rural and indigenous peoples. Development, including the building of roads, makes lives easier for people to meet their basic needs in many ways. And such changes are largely welcomed by the Abun. Better access to things like healthcare and education are paramount in people's minds. Imagine being sick or injured and have to be carried for 20 miles through rugged jungle terrain to reach a health clinic. Here you can see a nurse in this picture with jewelry and a nice watch. She is not Abun, she is from a different, more prosperous coastal ethnic group, the Biak people. This clinic was built along a new road in the Abun Highlands, but at this time had yet to be staffed and was already falling into disrepair. But because of the road, the city and hospital care are now a 4-hour drive away instead of a 4-day trek. So improvement is there. Lacking ready access to healthcare means relying on medicinal plants from the forest, which can be quite effective for certain ailments, though this knowledge is quickly disappearing. Here, a boy is treated with a numbing plant after cutting his finger to the bone with a machete. There are not reliable health statistics in this region, but death is a common part of village life, and mortality rates are certainly much higher than in more developed parts of Indonesia. It would be a mistake to simply portray the Abun by what they lack or as an object of pity. Many prefer the quietude and abundance of the forest even if they also desire access to better services. Construction, traffic, pollution, and simply more people can make traditional livelihoods much harder. The transition to a cash economy offers new opportunities, but a fraught path that many people like the Abun are not yet prepared for or accustomed to. Life beyond the road system is simpler and can be harder physically, but food is usually abundant, and people aren't forced to search for money. People work together and share. It is simply their way of life. There are not just the bodily needs, but also the spirit and communion. It was apparent to me, and something commented by Abun people themselves, that in many ways, people in the more remote villages are happier, more connected to each other, and experience less social conflict. People value time with family and also connection to the forest and its non-human inhabitants, both as a part of their livelihood and also spiritually. Life here is peaceful and often happy, but not always easy. There is still a desire for something more, to connect with the outside world. The arrival of development, migrant outsiders, and new cultural norms bring what the Abun call influences, and alcohol abuse is high among them, which itself results in more social conflict, domestic violence, and dependency on others. Consuming media in the presence of migrants brings changes in culture and values, much of which is unwelcome by the many Abun who prize social harmony above all else. Cultural norms that are threatened are things you might expect, like respect for elders and tradition, a hard work ethic, sharing instead of accumulating wealth, and knowledge of the forest and skill in living from it and in harmony with it. Changes in the environment and economy have, according to Abun themselves, left many youth, especially the men it seems, more idle. They do not yet have the opportunities for modern cash jobs, yet time in school and in cities leaves them less able and less motivated to hunt, make forest gardens, and carry on with the relative security of traditional livelihoods. They are in a difficult transition phase. One of the most important themes I encountered was the Abun's desire to feel connected with each other, and perhaps more surprisingly, with the outside world. Like many Papuans, they feel that they have been left behind in modern history. This is a place where many still hunt with spears and often lack electricity, but they also keep Facebook accounts. Almost anyone who has lived in such remote areas knows the miracle of finding that one spot in the village where you can magically get cell reception. Here, two of my research assistants successfully, it turned out, to contact our driver. Education is another way to feel connected. Many Abun seem to value education primarily for its own sake, rather than simply as a means to improve their economic situation or to get a job. They want to, as one man put it to me, know about the world like other people do. It is a way to more fully join the fellowship of humanity, even if it's not yet clear how. The desire for connection is also, of course, physical, and roads like cell phones can help people live a richer social existence. Abun people take great joy in visiting relatives, and yet also have a need to seek quiet and privacy in the forest, often for weeks at a time. To easily move from the deep forest to a town or city is one of the most valued possibilities of development. This push and pull between wanting solitude, then communion, and sometimes even craving the hustle and bustle and excitement of a city was something I definitely related to. But almost all of Boone agree that what was most important is the chance to live on their customary lands and receive government services there. This push and pull between wanting solitude and then communion, sometimes even the temporary, this push and pull extended to nature itself. People longed for roads, stores, and schools, but also lamented changes to the forest, especially the disappearance of animals. Some of the concern about the forest and its future is practical, especially in terms of hunting, but it is more than that. When birds of paradise are less frequently seen and heard, people are sad because they miss their voices. It is more interesting and beautiful when they are there, one man told me, as if he was talking about a friend. Delight in nature and non-human companions seemed self-evident there, as it does to me and probably to you too. Gunawan is an exceptional man because he is still young, but his knowledge of the forest and skill in exploiting it is renowned. I would accompany him into the forest, though obviously I slowed him down greatly, and he was very patient. He seemed at his most exuberant there, like an athlete enjoying her prowess, or an artist's mastery over his medium. Whenever Gunawan returned to the village, he was nearly inseparable from his youngest daughter, who he carried about the house in his yard, or to the river, or to wherever he went. Even Gunawan, so at home and successful in the forest, wondered about life in the city and what opportunities were there, and what it would be like to have more money. He wanted change for his family. As an anthropologist, one of my primary interests was in cultural change. The Abun have for at least a few generations been missionized into Christianity, but there are ongoing questions about the role of their own traditions and their new faith. There are several kinds of churches and Christian sects that are active in the territory. Some of them are more tolerant of Abun traditions than others, which creates internal divisions and heated debates about the role of their culture. Let's see if I go back to this. Being part of the church gives people a greater connection to other Papuans and other people in the world. Yet their own traditions give a sense of who they are as a people and how they connect to their land and each other. Here, people in the village of Bama reenact a ceremony when children graduate from after years of living apart from society in forest schools, where they receive practical and cultural wisdom. It is a practice that hasn't been done for an entire generation, though it lies at the core of many of their beliefs. To me, there is something a little tragic about this display because the joy and pride people showed was so evident, but the purpose behind the ceremony was fading fast. I think people have a kind of hunger to express their culture and re-embrace some of their traditions. Another vanishing tradition is the use of birthing huts, where pregnant women live apart and are attended to carefully in the months leading up to childbirth. Pictured here is a now rarely seen example. It's the small bamboo hut right next to the larger one. A new government-built house stands on the left, showing how quickly the land and culture are changing. Another important cultural element of Abun life is the exchange of kain timor, or Eastern cloths. They are used as a kind of wealth to arrange marriages and settle conflicts. This too is a vanishing practice, though the people here in Bangus Mama take great pride in maintaining it. Here, my friend Tony displays his inheritance, which he will use to marry off his eldest daughter, Novella, on the left. Exchanges of kind Timor and other kinds of wealth are a way to settle conflicts where modern social institutions are lacking and can be more effective in some ways. Here, representatives from two families settle a case of infidelity. An aggrieved husband wears the yellow shirt on the right. His father argues with his wife's aunt on the left. Now the father negotiates compensation. He carefully keeps track of the value of each piece of cloth being offered, which is displayed for all the extended family members to see. Oops. Here the families have agreed on the penalty, a large collection of kind Timor, much of which was contributed by members of the extended family. With the completion of this process, both parties, husband and wife and their families, agree to move forward without returning to this conflict again. It is considered a settled matter. Note how this very personal matter, adultery in a marriage, meant the coming together of many family members in the community to mediate and reestablish a sense of harmony. So I want to finish our time with the Abun by presenting a series of portraits, which is my favorite type of photography. At its best, it feels like a collaboration or co-creation, and a unique way for two people to interact and communicate on either side of the camera. Here again are Abun modeling now rarely used ceremonial dress, including their heirloom textiles, the kind Timor. The woman on the left wears a now rarely seen bark cloth around her waist. This was the primary clothing the Abun used until just a few hundred years ago, when they started trading with other Indonesians. This man smokes a traditional garden tobacco out the side of a leaf that he's fashioned. His Rastafarian clothes are commonly seen in Papua and can be a subtle way to express solidarity with Papua New Guinea. These are two elders in nearby villages. The woman on the left shared with me an important folk tale about her village, a story that may well disappear in their social memory after she passes away. A family I lived with dressed their youngest child, oops, it's very sensitive. A family I lived with dressed their youngest child, Melon, in ceremonial attire. And this is with the birds of paradise feather crown. These feathers, which are very highly valued, are used just for women's attire, and they move beautifully and hypnotically when their wearer dances. This is another elder, a shaman, or in the Abun language, a yewan. And now, sadly, he is too deaf to share his stories and wisdom. He's very difficult to communicate with, but he radiated a kind of ease and contentment that spoke a lot to me. So Abun youth, and I mean teenagers and young adults, I think are especially caught between two worlds, whether to learn and practice and use their traditional subsistence skills or to seek education and new ways of life in the city. Some can do both, but I think this is not an easy existence. This is a young man who, after some time in the city, had struggled with alcohol addiction and even spent some time in jail after getting into a lethal fight with migrants. He now spends more of his days hunting deep in the forest as a way to recuperate and get his life on track again. This man shows a quiet pride in his hunting skills, holding a deer skull and standing next to a boar hide. I'm embarrassed to say I failed to learn the names of many of the women who I saw frequently because they would only go by the name of their child. Here is Mama Dalila, or the mother of Dalila, her infant daughter. On the left, a man stands with a basket used for catching fish in the rivers. On the right, a woman known for her weaving, storytelling, and in her younger years, hunting prowess. I love the irony here. She weaves traditional bags using fibers from bark and reeds while wearing a Gucci shirt. My friend Deki is an avid learner and committed advocate for his people. Here he is visiting his customary land for the first time in his life. It is a pristine region, yet untouched by development. If the aspirations of the Abun people can possibly be distilled, perhaps it would go something like this. They want to protect and govern their customary land while still being able to grow in connection to the modern world. The good life means being connected to each other, with the land, and to new possibilities. So now I'm going to shift tracks a little bit, or a lot, and move into my own story rather than telling the story of other people. My journey to Alaska began, in fact, in Indonesia, almost 10 years ago. It was when I met a young, bright, and perhaps even precocious fellow language learner named Ray Friedlander, who is now Sedovia's city manager. Here we are pictured at the Balinese temple complex of Besauki. And this is the one photo in the collection that I didn't take. We had spent that summer studying the Indonesian language on nearby Java. And yes, if you ever hear Ray and I speaking an unfamiliar language to each other, we are probably talking about you in Indonesian, so watch out. Or as they say in Indonesian, hati-hati. Ray and I saw each other in Arizona and California the following year, but not again for the next 9 years. A time punctuated by infrequent but earnest and heartfelt emails and letters. When I returned from Papua, we decided, surprisingly, to see if there was still something worth revisiting between us. And as it happens, we made plans to see each other again in March of 2020. This was the first time we had seen each other in 9 years. And what a strange time to do so. During our week-long trip to Tucson, we went to the grocery store and found almost literally nothing left but crumbs. But we were happy, and with everything on hold and much of our work now online, it became surprisingly feasible to take up Ray's offer to, quote, spend a summer with me in Alaska. You'd be crazy not to. It was a place I had never been before or imagined myself visiting, yet was quite clearly calling now. Over the entire Alaskan summer, Ray and I never left the Kenai Peninsula until I returned to Tucson in late August for a spell. We never felt much need to go anywhere else, and it seemed every weekend and the long summer days were exhaustingly but happily full of adventure. At times, the landscape seemed like a sentient being determined to charm me. Despite my relief after years away in Indonesia to return home to Tucson and my own desire to settle down there for a while. You'll see a big change in my photography here. I have, over the years, most enjoyed taking pictures of people, of documenting issues and relationships. Perhaps I could explain it because this is a time now when everyone was social distancing and wearing masks, and it became harder to take documentary pictures of people. But in a way, Alaska asked me to open up my perspective in a much wider way for some time, to literally and metaphorically look at the big picture. As Ray often said, Alaska sure looks good on you, though I suppose the opposite was closer to the truth. It felt good and even healing to take this time. After years away in a strange land, speaking a different language, dependent on the care of people I was working very hard to understand. It felt good to spend so much time out in the open and to just be. I think of Abun men suddenly deciding it's time to go be alone in the forest for a while. Despite having just been in one of the most biologically diverse places on Earth, I was mesmerized by life in Alaska, much of it very unfamiliar, and surprised how fast the seasonal changes came. My camera equipment was for research in Papua and being close to people, not zooming in on shy wildlife. Yet I found Alaskan wildlife sometimes surprisingly accommodating. At Exit Glacier near Seward, we slowly approached this mountain goat, Annie and Kid. Eventually, we were more or less simply absorbed into their small little herd and spent the next few hours together. And there were some other surprisingly tolerant, curious, and approachable creatures I've encountered since then. I got close enough to this owl recently that my camera couldn't focus on it anymore, and I had to back away. This otter plopped down so close to me that, again, I felt obligated to back away because I didn't want to touch it. Based in Homer for the summer, Ray and I looked out many mornings and throughout the long days across Kachemak Bay at the other, wilder side. We took particular delights in our visits there. Perhaps some of the Abun had rubbed off on me, but I began to think of Homer, itself a small town, as too busy. And we did not have any suspicion that we would move across the bay, but perhaps this rainbow was an early and subtle clue. In Alaska, I recognized from my time in Papua the particular joy that comes with gaining sustenance from the land, even if only a little, and how abundant nature can be if we take care of it. Here's my friend Jen, someone I knew from Tucson, but who now lives in Anchorage. In late 2019, she visited Tucson with her partner, Andy, and the three of us spent a long evening talking, much of it about Alaska. And that was the first time I started thinking about coming here and even visiting Ray. So I'm very grateful that this happened. Perhaps the highlight of that strange and beautiful summer was our trip across the Tutka Backdoor Trail, a new trail that was created by Seldovians, Aaron McKittrick and Hig Higman, who we met when we were out on the trail. Again, was this a sign of things to come? I'm not sure, but we were falling deeply in love with each other and with this landscape. So this is where the story takes us to Seldovia. As the Alaskan winter began to descend on the landscape, Ray and I struggled with questions about our own pursuit of the good life. We knew that we wanted to settle together, but where to settle for the time being? It was an especially difficult question in such unusual and challenging times. We had spent months looking out across the bay, and now we were making the choice to try and live there. Now, instead of talking with people about living beyond the road system in a remote village, I was doing it myself. In a new town, my first Alaska winter, and during a pandemic. It seemed like a potential recipe for loneliness. In Seldovia, I felt just a little bit of the challenges experienced by the Abun in Papua, just a little bit. Shopping trips that must be carefully planned in other cities because transportation is so expensive. Frequent power outages and poor phone reception, and a little bit of the feeling of being cut off from the rest of the world. Oops. This place, especially in winter, is a time to slow down and go deep. Even though I've only been here a short time, in the dead of winter no less, I feel as in touch with the natural environment as I ever have. I'm learning to recognize not just kinds of animals, but individuals, and where they like to go by their tracks in the snow. Or their favorite rocks to perch on, and what times of day you might find them there. The closeness of village life and new friends is slowly unfolding, especially as the pandemic starts to recede. Perhaps emblematic of this place, this neighborly dog eagerly joined Ray and I on a long afternoon walk to play in the snow. Here, Aaron and Valisa show Ray and I the incredible world they talked about last month in their own presentation about Seldovia's tidal zone. I did not expect to find such tropical colors and abundant life just below the surface of Alaska's frigid water. Seldovia really started coming home to me as the snow began piling up and sculpting the landscape. And seeing Augustine's classic conical shape brings a sense of familiarity to me, recalling Indonesia's many island volcanoes. More than anything, I think Ray and I are appreciating the depth and simplicity that can come from living in such a place. We have much to learn and experience on this new path, but it seems a fitting place to reflect on the Abun and the peoples of Papua. As I write my dissertation. The new days grow longer with surprising speed, and I wonder if March isn't Alaska's best kept secret. As summer rapidly approaches and life slowly returns to normal, I feel very optimistic to be finding the good life in this new and unexpected place. And with that, I'd like to close and say thank you very much for your attention this evening. And I would be delighted to answer any of your questions. I'm going to turn my camera back on.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Absolutely fabulous. Wonderful.
That was great. That was just great, Jonathan. I have a question. In the slides in the very beginning, there was a wall inside one of the huts that had some kind of jaws on it. Now, were those special, you know which slide I'm talking about?
Yes, that's a wild boar. And they're collected as a kind of trophy. I think partly because they're a very dangerous animal to hunt. So they have very sharp teeth and they can kill people. So it is a kind of source of pride, much like people would hang antlers on the wall here, I think.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Thank you. Am I muted? Unmute. Thank you, Jonathan.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was amazing. And how did we get to be so lucky to somehow attract you guys to Seldovia, where we think you belong so well? And learning about New Guinea and the fabulous people there has just been a delight.
Oh, thank you. That's sweet.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Seems a little fated that we ended up here. So.
Mm-hmm.
I see Lisa like mysteriously popping in the background there, Hig.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the setting. Where do I turn the
How
background
do you
on?
do that?
Where it is. So.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Question, Jonathan.
Yes, Kimmy. Nice to see you.
I know, that was so lovely. I was muted, but like I was just making loud exclamations at the beautiful images.
I want to let everybody know that Kimmy is definitely going to come to Seldovia this summer because she's going to Homer for a writing residency. Isn't that right?
Oh.
Finally.
So, yeah, you'll be seeing her.
After many postponements.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I really appreciated the turning of the tables onto yourself. I just thought that was really, really beautiful. But I do, and I have a question just about the way that you make the portraits and what that process, portraits of other humans, and what that process is, and how you establish. It seemed very clear to me that there was a collaboration going on, and that maybe they were making choices about what they were going to be photographed with or how. And so I'm just curious if you could talk a little more about that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I never like to take pictures of people if I think they're going to be uncomfortable or without their permission. And, permission might not be like formal, like, can I take your picture? But you get a feel of, if you have a camera, and some people want their picture to be taken and others don't. So that's a part of it. Many of those pictures are with people that I spent a lot of time with. So we had, basically becoming friends or just very familiar. So that there was an ease to that. And then a lot of the portraits, my research team, we conducted a survey and we did a lot of household interviews. So after a lot of the interviews, if it felt right, I would ask people if they wanted their portrait taken. And if they said yes, then I would take their picture. And if it didn't, I could usually tell if someone wouldn't be comfortable with that. So, yeah.
And then just to follow up, because I work in publishing also, just curious about what the agreement is like, because as you were showing those images, I was like, oh, these, like, people have to see these. What's he going to do with these? What outlets? I'm already like, oh, he should send this to this and this to this, But then I was like, what's your agreement with those people in terms of how those photographs, is that for your research? Is that for this kind of showing, and how, what's your agreement with those people about how to share that work?
Right. No, I think that's a really good question. And any photographer, like if you're in the United States, like you have a right to take a picture of anyone that you want and use those photos. That's not necessarily ethical, but in those kind of situations, it's just part of the bigger research process of, these are not communities that you could just show up with as an outsider and especially start taking pictures. So it's a series of introductions and explanations. Here's why this person's here. Here's the goal of his research. And here's how it can benefit us. And there would be no question of taking pictures if that process wasn't conducted. And that's through, different intermediaries, but ultimately Aboon people themselves who, work with nonprofits and government agencies and have experience with community leadership. They were critical partners, and without that, none of this would have happened. So,
yeah, thank you.
But it's difficult, for a lot of people who live in those kind of environments. It's really hard for them to grasp, what happens to these images. So I think there's a certain level of trust that has to get directed through these sorts of intermediaries who are more familiar with that whole world. But it's a really important question, and one that I take very seriously in the course of the work. Yeah. Thanks, Kimmy.
I can't wait to cross the bay, maybe even.
Oh, for sure.
Cool.
For sure. Anybody else?
You just got a great handle on the whole picture, I think. For such a short time in Seldovia, you really captured the essence of it, I believe.
Well, I haven't started taking people pictures really yet, so just look out.
Oh, yes. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
You have, Jonathan. You and Rachel joining our community is fantastic. And we're so happy that you accepted our invitation to do the photo essay. And it's as spectacular as what we thought it was going to be. Is there anybody else online that would like to talk to Jonathan or ask a question? Felicia, you keep going in and out. It's kind of freaky on me watching you.
Just popping in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at this time, what I'll say is that, well, if anybody has any questions, don't worry, just put it out there. That our next and our last photo essay will be the last Friday of April, and that'll be with Cindy Mom, our local birdist and naturalist. It's going to be another spectacular program, and we're really excited about the 3 that we've done. And as Jonathan said earlier, we've got them on YouTube, and Jonathan will be posting this up on YouTube probably by tomorrow. But it's been great having everyone join us tonight. And yeah, you're, one thing I had a question about, how long, Jonathan, had the Boone people been exposed to other civilizations, or when, like, how many years have they been exposed, and do they actually intermingle much with the other tribes that are near them?
Well, that's a good question. They had a long history of trade and interaction with other ethnic groups in the area that are quite similar to them. The real shift came at about the World War II era. So slightly before that, some Dutch missionaries, German missionaries arrived, or missionaries from other ethnic groups that had already been missionized. And then really in the post-World War II era, and actually the United States built a huge military base, Douglas MacArthur, in Abun territory. So that was a real shocking turn of events, for these people living in the forest, when suddenly, literally, the US military parks on their beach, this in the Pacific War. So there's still many remnants of that military base, in that area. But things then go kind of quiet for a while, and the government is aware of them, but not really doing much in their territory. So it's really just a few mission schools and things like that, until really in the past, I would say 10 or 15 years, that things have really changed. But in that time, a lot of people left their territory to go to the cities and see what it was like. But now, because the roads are being built, a lot of people are returning to their customary lands. Yes. It's a good question.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. Vivian, you can't hear you.
Sorry, there we go. Just letting Jonathan know that we've got some information in the chat. I don't see any questions. It's more of thank you so much. And so you may want to read those, Jonathan.
All right, thanks. Thank you, everybody.
All right, if there's no other questions, I guess we can let Jonathan go, and just thank you so much, Jonathan, for helping us out and being a part of our community. And looks like people are heading out.
All
And
right.
Stephen, are you a friend of Jonathan's?
Yes, yeah, he is.
Oh, all right, well, welcome. Are you also going to come up and visit? Oh,
He'll definitely be out here. He's a mountain.
okay. All right, good.
All right. Well,
Okay, well,
have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you.
all right, thank you. Wonderful. All right, bye-bye.